Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, monamili wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Jenn Wint. She is here to celebrate Josie's busy calendar. Before we invite Jenn into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Simple Words Decodable Chapter Books. From a very young age, Cheatham Knebel's son had a passion for books. Unfortunately, reading did not come naturally to him. In 2015, at age 6, he was diagnosed with dyslexia. With training, he soon began to read simple words and sentences. One night, he picked up Hop on Pop by Dr. Seuss. He read the entire 160-plus words over and over, and then asked for a chapter book. Cheatham Googled, talked to experts, teachers and tutors and parents to find low-level, high-interest books. She knew other parents were in search of these books too, but they simply didn't exist. So she began to write for her son, and he began to read. And Project Simple Words was born. We believe the right books give kids with dyslexia the opportunity to experience a love of reading and enjoy a chapter book without tears. Check them out today. Simple Words Decodable Chapter Books. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by The Lost Colors by Sally Alexander. It's book 1 in the Adventures of Caitlin and Rio series. It's a great middle grade novel for kids aged 8 to 12. No one is more surprised than young Caitlin Meggert when she wakes up to her cat Rio talking to her, and the world around them suddenly cloaked in grays without any colors. Caitlin and Rio are joined by best friends Molly and Trudy. Together, they investigate the odd phenomenon and discover a much larger, sinister plan is underway, and it's up to them to stop it before it's too late. Brilliant scientists, a criminal mastermind, world destruction come face to face with 3 clever girls and a talking cat in this thrilling adventure. Kirkus Reviews describes the book as fun and fast-moving, a bright, vibrant adventure. You and your kids are going to love The Lost Colors by Sally Alexander. Join us right now from beautiful Vancouver in British Columbia in the wonderful nation of Canada. Our guest today is here to celebrate her children's book. It's called Josie's Busy Calendar. Please welcome to the show, Jenn Wint. Hey, Jenn, how are you?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. It's a wet and rainy day here in Boston. So is that what Vancouver's like today? That's what I hear it's like all the time.
Yeah, well, it was raining last night, but it's actually sunny this morning. So
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell us all about Josie's Busy Calendar.
Well, Josie's Busy Calendar is a children's book for kids sort of ages, I'd say around like 5 to 10. I call it a self-care starter book for kids. I wrote it when did I write it? I guess it's about 3 years ago now. I was suffering with a little bit of postpartum anxiety after my second child was born, after my daughter was born. And I was trying to explain to my son, who at that time was about 2.5 going on 3, trying to explain to him what anxiety was and what anxious feelings were. And we talked about, butterflies in your tummy and just feeling worried but not knowing why. And I looked around for kids' books. I had often written little stories for him, but my go-to as a parent when I want to help explain something to my child, like when it was time for a big boy bed, when it was time to toilet train, all of these things, I go straight to my library, straight to my book resources, and think, how could I explain this to him using characters and books? And when it came to anxiety, I really struggled to find a book that sort of spoke about anxiety in the way that I wanted to talk to him about it, in the way that I wanted to use the word anxiety, and I wanted to talk about how it shows up in our bodies. So I went back to one of the little stories that I had written him and decided to turn that into a book, and in hopes of helping other kids and parents.
Yeah. You use the term self-care starter kit. Now, if I were I'm almost 100 years old, so if you had taken me at your age and just kind of transformed me and dropped me into the year 2022 and someone said the term self-care starter kit, I'd look at them like, what do you mean self-care? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. Self-care is a little bit of a buzzword and definitely kind of a new thing. And I think that a lot of people into their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond are embracing self-care and sort of figuring it out. So my thought with this book is if we can start kids understanding self-care, practicing self-care at really young ages, then they won't have to learn it like some of us have had to learn it. I know I've definitely had to learn it and sort of make a practice of it and be very, very strategic with self-care. And ideally, I would love my kids to be able to listen to their bodies, listen to the way that they're feeling, look at what's going on in their life and be able to implement self-care almost second nature if possible.
Yeah. Really, that makes a lot of sense because we want to teach our kids skills that they can use for the rest of their lives. And if they learn it, just like reading, if our kids learn to read in kindergarten, first, second grade, it's natural to them. If somehow a kid, and we've had guests on the podcast, Malcolm Mitchell comes to mind, a very successful professional football player turned author who arrived in college unable to read. And, trying to learn how to read at 18 or 20 is much more difficult than at 5. And I'm imagining trying to learn how to care for yourself and use positive self-talk and do all the things that we need to do to give ourselves good mental health. It's a lot easier to learn when we're young and implement it when we're young than when you're an old man like me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in the book, a quick synopsis is Josie, she starts school. So it's sort of a book that talks a lot about transitions. She starts school. She gets really excited to see all of her friends. She books all these play dates. She's got, swimming on Monday, bike riding on Tuesday, cake baking on Thursday, and so on. And then after a couple of days of being really busy, her tummy starts to sort of tell her that something's not right. And so what she does is she goes and sort of lies in a field for an hour or so, or maybe 10 minutes, and listens to her body and thinks, you know what, I need to take time for myself. And in the way that she does that, she puts herself on her calendar, makes play dates with herself so that she has time to kind of rest and recharge so that she can be the best friend that she can be to her friends and also to herself. So if we can start implementing the idea of rest and the idea of acknowledging what's going on in your life and saying, it's too much. I'm too busy. My calendar is too full. I need to take some time and just some downtime to recharge and rest. If we can start showing our kids that, not only telling them, but showing them, which is an ongoing challenge for me. have such a full calendar myself, and people often say to me, I think there's a book about this. Have you read that book? So it's definitely a practice. It's definitely ongoing. But I think if we can show our kids what it looks like to rest and recharge, then hopefully that's something that they can incorporate into their lives.
You bring up an interesting point. We've heard that there are a lot more kids showing anxiety or experiencing anxiety than there ever were. And the question is, are we just becoming more aware of it now, or actually kids more anxious and feeling more? Are more kids dealing with anxiety? But you also brought up that Josie has a very busy calendar. Josie is doing this on Monday and that on Tuesday and this on Wednesday. And as you were saying that, I thought back to when I was a kid, and I didn't have a calendar. We went to school, we came home, and then our parents kicked us out and said, come back when the street lights come on. And we just did whatever. There was no planning, no scheduling. We played baseball or street hockey until we get exhausted, and then we hung out on somebody's stoop until they threw us off, and then we went somewhere else. Do you think that's part of it, that our kids have just become so scheduled and their lives have become so structured that they don't have that natural kind of free time that I experience and others my age?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt kids are overscheduled these days. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. You said we went and played, I can't remember if you said hockey. So we played hockey and then we sat on someone's stoop. So that was a natural rest. Mm-hmm. So imagine if you were playing hockey and then your mom said, okay, time now to go to soccer practice, and then time now to go to piano lessons, and then time now to go to math club. There's no rest. Mm-hmm. But you were playing sports, you were running around, you were physically exerting yourself. And then as a group, I'm guessing somebody said, I'm tired, let's go and sit down. Other kids said, great. And then you all went and relaxed, probably had a snack, probably had a chat. So yeah, we've kind of taken away those rest periods from our kids. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons that that's happening. Mm-hmm. Obviously a lot has changed in the last couple of decades, and we're just as people, we're just overstimulated, because oftentimes as well, when we are asking our children to rest, we turn the TV on for them. Where when I kind of had my rest periods when I was young, it was always books or playing or, creating and make believe. And TV isn't really rest. It's not giving your brain a chance to recharge and rebuild. So yeah, I think a lot has changed, and I definitely think that we are overstimulated, and kids just need more free time. They need more, well, as Josie says, she needs more Josie time, more play dates with yourself.
Yeah. And that brings up a dilemma. Where do we, obviously giving our kids opportunities to play soccer and do ballet and learn piano. These are all wonderful things that add a lot of value to our kids' life, but at what cost? And I don't think that we as parents think about that enough as we're thinking about all these wonderful things we're giving to our kids, and maybe it's just a little bit too much wonderful.
I think you can pick a little bit of wonderful. We sort of see on social media and all of these influences that we're getting all the time that you have to do soccer, dance, piano, math, learn Spanish, all of these things. And you don't. You can do soccer once a week, and then you can have a couple of days where you do nothing. You can have a day on the weekend where you wake up in the morning and you don't know what you're going to do until you're doing it. I think we feel a lot of pressure as parents to expose our children to everything, to sign them up for everything. I know that I feel that for sure, even as I'm sitting here and reassuring other people that you don't have to do it. I definitely feel those pressures myself. You want to expose your kids to every opportunity, but they really don't need everything all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Writing children's books. You are a storyteller. You're involved with social media and telling stories or telling brand stories in social media. Was it a big challenge for you to kind of get out of that social media type of storytelling and into picture books?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting process for me, because I am a storyteller, but most of my day job is telling other people's stories. I would have no problem, creating content and talking about your story, on behalf of you. But when, the time came to sort of talk about my own story and say, I've written this book, this is why I've written it, this is what I hope to achieve with it. I did find it a lot more challenging to sort of toot my own horn. Mm-hmm. It's easier to share the good news of others, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And what about this story? One of the things that's amazing about social media is that we think about picture books as being very limited as to how many words and how many pictures we can use to tell a story. I think a lot of times in social media, there's even fewer words and fewer images that we can use to get across a very powerful story. What was the key for you in learning how to communicate complicated stories with in such short spurts? Or boy, talk about being inarticulate here. How did you learn how to be able to tell those stories in such a quick matter of time? I'm just going to get up and let you
word
talk.
Count. I think you're talking about
Thank
word
you.
count.
There you go. 2 words. I couldn't think of either one of them.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Word count in social media is everything. And I think when we tell a story, we usually start with the beginning and we give you a bit of warm up, a bit of background on the characters. Maybe we set the scene and then we move into the action. And then usually there's some kind of a problem or a challenge that a character is experiencing. And then we kind of work through that with them and then we wrap it up. And in social media, you just go straight in for the action. If Josie's busy calendar was, let's say a tweet instead of a children's book, it would start with Josie's anxious. She's anxious because she's overstimulated, too much on her calendar. She makes time for herself. This is self-care. It's kind of just those short snippets. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of character development. The beautiful part, I think, about a children's book is that you do have a chance for character development, and illustrations obviously make it so beautiful. But I've done a couple of readings of Josie's busy calendar, and I've talked to a lot of kids about it. And I love hearing what they take from it. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot that can be, I was going to say there's not a lot that can be interpreted through a tweet. And that is completely incorrect. There's a lot that can be interpreted through a tweet. But what can be interpreted through a children's book is so beautiful because some children that I've talked to don't even really pick up on the fact that we're talking about anxiety. They think that Josie has this great life and that incorporating play in all different kinds of ways is just a wonderful story. So I think there's a real opportunity when you have a bit of time and visual support to really create a story that a lot of people can take what they need from it.
Yeah, that is really important, and must be wonderful for you as an author to sit down and to kind of discover that, wow, everybody is seeing this story that I wrote through my particular lens, have a completely different take on it because they're looking at it through their lens and their perspective.
Absolutely. And one of the funniest things I've heard is I was chatting with a woman and she said, my 70-year-old mother took your book out of the library and read it every night for a week and then returned it to the library. And I thought, now why is a 70-year-old woman reading a book that's written for 5-year-olds? And it was really interesting chatting with her daughter about it. And she said overwhelm and overscheduling and overstimulation is an ageless challenge. And I hear from a lot of moms, they say, I'm always glad when my kid brings your book over because I know that I'm going to take something from it as well. Because the other thing about overwhelm and self-care and taking time for yourself is you can't hear it once. Mm-hmm. You have to hear it again. You have to practice it. You have to forget. You have to hear it again. So it's interesting that it is such a practice. And you're right. Chatting with kids about books, is such a joy. Like I love kind of after every page you look up and you just sort of see their faces, and there's always at least 1 or 2 kids that have a question. And sometimes a reading, to read your book front to back takes 6 or 7 minutes, but doing a reading with several kids can take up to 30 minutes as you sort of lose the story at some points, but it's so beautiful to kind of hear what they're thinking or what's on their mind, or for them to share a story about their own calendar. Yeah. You said that you didn't have a calendar as a kid. And I don't know if I did either. I think I may have sort of had one as more of a decorative piece, but a lot of kids these days have physical calendars mm-hmm. as a way to kind of manage their activities and to know what's coming up next.
Yeah. I actually don't think calendars were invented when I was a kid, but we certainly didn't have, none of us were taking ballet we weren't playing soccer. The sports that we played were not structured. It was down to the playground or playing, like we said, street hockey in a parking lot, playing stickball in the middle of the street. Just that kind of unstructured, go out, play to your, you have to go to the
well, you were listening to your body probably. Getting up in the morning and deciding, do I feel like playing hockey? Do I feel like reading a book? Do I feel like building something? And kind of letting your mind and your body tell you. Because some days you'd be tired. You'd say, I'm just going to lie around and play with blocks today. Yeah. And other days it's like, I want to play street hockey for 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, like we were saying earlier, it's too bad we lost that, but at the same time, it's wonderful that our kids get to experience all these other things. We have to find a good place in the middle.
Absolutely. And I think that's sort of what the book is talking about, that you can have this busy calendar, but you just need to make sure that you do have those pockets of rest. Yeah. So, you can even have busy seasons. I find fall for parents and kids is a really busy season. There's lots of sports that start up in September. There's obviously back to school. There's Halloween coming up. There's all these things that keep you really busy. And with that in mind, maybe think ahead and think, okay, over Christmas break, we're going to really, be strategic about some downtime and some opportunity to kind of listen to our bodies and listen to what we feel like doing, and making some, spontaneous decisions.
Yeah. I like that. Spontaneity.
Yes.
Are there other social emotional lessons that you hope to teach kids in future books?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely have book number 2 in mind and in motion. And if I'm honest, a lot of it is about overwhelm and about rest and regulation. My son is almost 6 and he gets very overwhelmed very quickly, but very excited about things. He's always planning something. He's always planning a party or an event, or he told me a few weeks ago there were 400 people coming to our house for a concert, and luckily his numbers were off and no one came. But he said, "It's okay, Mom, no one came. We can just film the concert and you can put it on the internet." Okay. I said, "Okay, yeah, sure. We'll do that instead." But I think the kids feel the same pressure that we as adults feel to do and to achieve and to produce. And working from home, as I do, is a beautiful thing. But in a way, my kids often see me working. And so they feel this pressure to work as well, and to always be busy. So I think, mental health is such an important conversation with kids. And another thing I'd love to write about is grief. When we look at kids' books about grief, there's some really interesting ones, but I think a lot of them are very, not as practical as some of the conversations that I'd like to be having about mental health. I think the vocabulary is very important when talking to kids. And in speaking about anxiety, lots of times we call it tummy knots or butterflies. And I'd like to name it so that my son can come to me and say, "Mom, I'm feeling a little bit anxious," as we're rushing out the door to get to this birthday party, to get to then soccer practice right after. I'm feeling anxious. I think I need to take a time out. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy that you're looking to tackle these subjects in books. Talking about grief, and when I was growing up, we didn't talk about it at all. And I'm really delighted that we do have kids' books about grief and loss and helping kids understand death, because that, as I said, that was it wasn't that long ago that families didn't talk about it at all.
And I think it's so important for the role of books, because if you can read a book about someone experiencing grief, someone who's lost a pet or a family member or someone close to them, then when it happens, in your own family, you have that reference point. Books allow kids to go through those emotions on behalf of someone else. They're not feeling the grief. They're reading a story. They're hearing about, John, who's feeling grief and feeling loss and experiencing that. And they almost, in a way, get to try on those feelings. And then when you close that book, they get to put them away. so that when it does happen in your own life, you have that reference point and you've sort of played with those feelings a little bit. You know how to name them and you know how to talk about them. And then as a parent, you can say, do you remember when we read that book? And the child will say yes. And if they say no, then you can pull the book out again. That's, I could talk about the value of children's books and learning through stories. And, it's like there's been a lot of talk recently just in the season that we're in with Halloween about costumes and trying on a character. And I think that's what books allow us to do every day of the year. I would hope that a lot of kids reading Josie's Busy Calendar haven't felt anxiety, but I do hope that if they do, they're able through reading the book to kind of name it and understand it.
Yeah. I think that's really, really important. Jenn, we have a lot of authors who listen to the show and we love it. And they're all out there struggling to let the world know about their book. And of course they're hearing, oh, you got to be on social media. I have to have a bazillion followers and I got to do all this kind of stuff. And I don't know the first thing about it. What's the one piece of advice you might share with authors who are struggling to tell the world about their book through social media without going on social media saying, buy my book every 5 minutes? Because that doesn't work at all.
Well, I think the first thing to know is don't be shy, because not everyone sees every post. So you might feel like every day you're saying, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, but everyone is not seeing that post every day. They might be seeing it once a week or once a month. So that, first of all, there's that. But I agree. You can't just say, buy my book, buy my book. And it's interesting, but the way to sell stories is through stories. So if you want to sell your book, your storybook, tell a story about your book. Talk about the time that you talked to someone about your book. Share a story of reading your book to a child and what that child had to say. I think sharing stories about the way that people experience your book is what's going to draw a reader or a buyer into making the purchase of your book.
I like that. Tell stories about your stories.
That's exactly it. People don't buy products. They buy stories. They buy feelings. They buy experiences. And so if they can read that someone has had an experience with your book, they want to buy that experience. And if your book is sort of the conduit of that experience, then that's what they're going to purchase.
Wow. That's really powerful advice, and I appreciate you sharing that. I really would appreciate if you share with us now where we can go to find out more about Josie's Busy Calendar and find out more about you.
Yeah, the best place to find me is on Instagram. So I'm at Jenn with 2 N's _Wint. And that's Wint, W-I-N-T, rhymes with mint. So yeah, at Jenn _Wint. I share lots of content there. I share lots about my kids, lots about my inspiration, and I share a lot of stories about other books. I love reading books and sharing books, and so I'm always kind of talking about what I'm reading with my kids and what I'm reading myself.
Perfect. We've had a really fun time speaking to the author of Josie's Busy Calendar, Jenn Wint. Jenn, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. It's been great to chat.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Corey Hinkle. He'll be here to celebrate Beloved, beautiful picture book based on the music by recording artist Jordan Felice. It's a great, great conversation. You don't want to miss it. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Jenn Wint. Please be sure to check out Josie's Busy Calendar. Also want to thank our sponsor, Sally Alexander. Check out the Lost Colors. And we also want to thank the folks at Simple Words Decodable Chapter Books. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Mirabella Q, Skylar Strauss, Jordan Saley. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy calendar to be with us. And thanks so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.